The small city of Solister was as lively as ever, its cobbled streets alive with merchants hawking their wares and townsfolk bustling to and fro. Amid the clamor, Clancy's tavern and inn stood as a sanctuary for adventurers like Tritan, Mesra, Lana, Grodd, and Ven. The inn's warm interior, filled with the aroma of roasted meats and the hint of freshly brewed ale, was their preferred gathering place. Grodd leaned back in his chair, taking a swig of Clancy's famous ale, and lets out a contented sigh.
Now this is what I call living. A proper brew, hearty food, and chairs that feel like they don't splinter under a dwarf's weight.
High praise from you. This is a first for you, Grodd.
Mesra noted with a faint smile as she sipped her tea. Across the table, Ven shuffled a deck of cards with the precision of a seasoned gambler. The soft snap of the cards punctuated the air as he flicked one onto the table.
Grodd's just preparing himself for more gripes and grumbling once we have another quest.
Grodd narrows his eyes at Ven, gesturing with 2 fingers from his eyes to Ven, making it clear he's watching him closely.
Speaking of quests, we've got another job.
Tritan interjected, his commanding voice drawing their attention. He placed a letter on the table, the wax seal already broken.
Who is this from?
Mesra leans over to read the letter with curiosity. Tritan leans back on his chair.
I received this letter from a messenger earlier this morning. It's from Lady Seraphina Velmont, a local noblewoman and collector of rare artifacts. She seeks the Ember Shard, a gemstone of incredible rarity and beauty.
The Ember Shard. I've heard of it. Legends say it was mined from the heart of a meteorite centuries ago. It's said to emit a faint, ethereal glow, and was thought to bring good fortune to those who carried it. From my understanding, this shard is not imbued with great power. However, I believe its rarity makes it priceless to collectors.
And it's hidden in Trifalgry's rift.
Tritan added, his tone grim.
And it seems we have competition.
Lana's interest peaked at the mention of competition.
Other raiders?
6 of them, based on what Velmont's scouts reported. They're after the shard for someone else.
It figures, with a lot of other adventurers hanging about Solister.
Grodd muttered, finishing off his ale. One of the barmaids approaches with a tray of steaming plates, setting them down with a flourish.
Eat up, friends, before it gets cold.
This is a feast, lass. Tell Clancy that if this tavern ever shuts down, I'll personally raid a dragon's hoard to keep you in business.
Grodd said, digging in with enthusiasm. The barmaid returns a cheerful smile before turning away to help the other patrons. The group chuckled at Grodd's rare moment of goodwill before turning their focus back to the task ahead to prepare for their long trek the next morning. The journey to the Trifalgry's Rift, a labyrinth of crumbling subterranean tunnels carved deep beneath the jagged cliffs of the desolate peaks, was fraught with unease. The atmosphere shifted as soon as they crossed into the rift's shadowed maw. The air grew colder, damp with an almost oppressive weight that clung to the skin. This was a place abandoned by the surface world, its secrets sealed away under layers of stone and malice. The party paused at the threshold of the cave's entrance, where sunlight gave way to impenetrable darkness. Tritan unsheathed his sword, its polished steel catching the last fading light.
Stay close, everyone. This place has claimed plenty of lives, and I don't intend for ours to join them,
he instructed, his voice steady despite the tension that crackled in the air. Mesra held up her staff, murmuring a soft incantation. A pale, glowing orb of light emerged, illuminating the path ahead. The spell's light danced across the rough-hewn walls, revealing old mining equipment and abandoned carts that hinted at the rift's long-forgotten history. The deeper they ventured, the more treacherous the terrain became. The walls grew narrower, the air staler. Strange claw marks marred the stone, and faint whispers echoed through the tunnels, likely the wind, though none of them dared to say so aloud. Lana knelt to inspect a frayed rope left near a rusted pulley system.
It looks like someone's been here recently.
She murmured, her fingers brushing over faint boot prints in the dust.
It could be our rivals. If they're ahead of us, we'll need to be cautious.
Mesra said, her voice thoughtful as she glanced back at the rest of the group.
And if we run into those other dungeon raiders?
Ven asked.
Then we deal with that concern at that time.
Tritan said firmly.
Right now, we focus on the goal.
The passage opened into a vast chamber. The light revealed scattered debris, remnants of old battles, and a faint trail of footprints leading deeper into the Trifalgri's rift. Tritan motioned for the group to remain cautious as they moved forward, their footsteps muffled on the stone floor. The silence of the chamber was broken by the faint echo of voices ahead, growing louder with each step. As the adventurers crept closer, they spotted the rival dungeon raiders camped at the center of a large room. 6 figures, their mismatched armor and weapons betraying their roles, were locked in conversation around a crude map spread across a makeshift table.
Looks like they're planning their next move.
Mesra whispered, her sharp eyes observing their formation. The rival group was composed of a burly human fighter with a scarred face and a massive longsword strapped across his back. His commanding posture marked him as their leader, a half-orc barbarian with wild hair and a fierce expression, her greatsword resting casually on her shoulder. A wiry elven man wearing dark clothes, carrying a perpetual smirk and daggers strapped across his chest. A gnome whose fingers occasionally sparked with faint, magical energy. A halfling with a short bow slung across his back and an air of quiet confidence. And another human fighter in tarnished armor, his stern gaze fixed on the group's map.
They have us outnumbered.
Lana murmured, her hand drifting toward the hilt of her dagger.
But I don't see why that should stop us.
Grodd grunted with the expression of confidence.
We could take 'em. They don't look so tough.
Or we could try to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. They don't know we're here yet.
Mesra interjected, her voice calm but firm. Tritan nodded.
Mesra's right. Let's see if we can talk our way out of this.
The group approached cautiously, Tritan leading the way, with his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Kalron, the leader, noticed them first, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword. The others in his party tensed, their eyes narrowing at the sight of the adventurers.
Well, look who decided to join the party,
Kalron said, his voice dripping with sarcasm.
I hope you're here only to find fossils for your class project.
No, we are here for the Ember Shard.
Tritan replied firmly. Kalron's expression darkened.
Then you've got a problem, because we're not leaving here without it.
Thara, the half-orc, grinned, pointing at them with her great sword.
Careful, Kalron. They look like they might actually put up a fight.
Doesn't mean they'll win.
Enith added, flipping a dagger in his hand. Tritan held his ground, his tone steady.
We don't have to do this. There's enough danger in these tunnels without us fighting each other.
Kalron scoffed.
Spare me the diplomacy. We've got a job to do, and so do you. Question is, which of us is leaving this place alive?
The tension in the room was palpable as both groups stared each other down. Grodd broke the silence with a snort.
You all look like you couldn't fight your way out of a tavern brawl.
Thara bristled.
Big words from a puny dwarf. Care to test them?
Before Grodd could respond, Mesra stepped forward, her voice cutting through the heated exchange.
This artifact isn't worth any of our lives. But if you insist on fighting, know this. We don't go down easily.
Drovo, the gnome wizard, stepped closer to Kalron and whispered something. The human fighter's eyes narrowed as he kneeled down to hear what his small companion has to say, and he seemed to weigh his options. Finally, he gestured for his group to lower their weapons.
We'll let the shard decide. Whoever gets to it first keeps it. Fair enough?
Kalron said. Tritan hesitated, then nodded.
Fair enough. But if we cross paths again, let's hope we can keep it civil.
Kalron smirked.
Don't count on it.
The rival raiders quickly retreated down a separate passage, while Tritan and his companions took on another way. The tunnels grew narrower and more treacherous, the air thick with tension. Finally, they arrived way ahead of their rivals at a massive stone door carved with intricate runes. The faint glow of the Ember Shard, a fiery orange gemstone, could be seen through a crack in the door, its light reflecting off the walls like a beacon.
This is it.
Mesra said, running her fingers over the runes.
But it's locked. And these symbols seems to be a puzzle.
Lana stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with excitement.
Step aside. Puzzles are my specialty.
After a few moments, the last rune clicked into place, and the door groaned open. Inside, the chamber was bathed in the soft glow of the Ember Shard, which rested on a pedestal at the center. The adventurers moved cautiously, aware of the traps likely guarding such a treasure. As they stepped closer, the ground shifted, and a series of spikes shot up from the floor, narrowly missing Grodd.
Blasted traps!
He growled, leaping to safety. A few moments later, Lana managed to disable the rest of the traps. She reached the pedestal and carefully lifted the Ember Shard, its fiery light casting warm shadows on the walls.
Got it.
She called, tucking it safely into her pouch. The fiery gemstone's glow was muted now, though it seemed to hum faintly, almost as if it could sense the danger yet to come. Tritan led the group toward the narrow ravine, where they had entered the subterranean expanse. Relief flickered in their hearts until they spotted 6 figures blocking their path. The rival dungeon raiders stood in a loose semicircle, weapons drawn. Kalron, their leader, stepped forward, his long sword gleaming in the dim light. His face was set in a grim scowl.
"You've got something that belongs to us,"
he said coldly, his voice cutting through the stillness. Tritan raised his hand, signaling his companions to hold their ground. He kept his tone calm but firm.
We had an agreement. Whoever obtains the shard first keeps it.
Kalron gritted his teeth.
"Hand over the Ember Shard, or we'll take it by force."
Grodd hefted his great axe, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the handle.
Typical cowards! Can't stand losing, so you pull this stunt.
Grodd, don't.
Mesra said gently, resting a hand on the dwarf's arm. Her steady voice eased the tension brewing within the group. She shifted her gaze to Kalron, her eyes locking onto his with unyielding determination.
We made a pact. A pact that upholds the Dungeon Raiders Code. Where is the honor in breaking that agreement?
Kalron's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Thara stepped forward, her expression one of grim determination.
Enough words. We've been hired to retrieve the shard, and we're not leaving without it.
Tritan stepped forward, his shield at the ready, but his sword still sheathed. His voice was steady, his words carrying the weight of leadership.
This agreement was played out fair and square, witnessed by both parties. Please, don't do this.
Kalron seemed to waver for a moment, his gaze flicking to his companions. Thara, the half-orc barbarian, snarled.
They think we're weak. Let's show them otherwise.
I agree.
Enith chimed in with a smirk. Already flipping a dagger between his fingers, Drovo muttered a few words under his breath, his fingers sparking faintly with magic. Valdos, the halfling ranger, notched an arrow, his bow drawn taut, while Raymar crossed his arms and narrowing his eyes at Tritan. Kalron's hand tightened on his longsword.
"Our plan was to let you do the dirty work retrieving the shard. Now that you have it, you can surrender it to us. However, I will give you 15 gold pieces for your efforts, and we can call it even. What say you?"
That wasn't our deal, and you know it. If you won't uphold the code, then there's only one way to resolve this.
Tritan growls, drawing his sword. Kalron unsheathes his sword with a smirk.
"Perfect. Then that's the way it shall be."
The rival dungeon raiders surged forward, their battle cries echoing through the narrow ravine. Tritan raised his shield just in time to deflect Kalron's powerful swing, the clang of steel on steel reverberating in the confined space.
Grodd, on my left!
Tritan barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. The dwarf charged forward, his great axe swinging in a deadly arc that Thara, the half-orc, barely managed to parry.
Finally, some real action.
Mesra stepped back, her hands weaving a glowing sigil in the air. With a sharp command, she unleashed a burst of arcane energy that slammed into Drovo, the gnome wizard, sending him sprawling.
Ven, keep that ranger away from us,
she called. The bard sprang into action, cracking his whip to disrupt the halfling ranger's aim.
Certainly, my dear sorceress.
Ven quipped, witnessing an arrow that fell short from him.
Oh, bravo! Truly a masterful display of skill and precision, my pint-sized friend. The way that arrow limped through the air. Inspirational. Next time, maybe try throwing the bow itself. It might fly straighter.
Lana darted through the fray, her movements fluid and precise, as she engaged Enith in a deadly dance of blades.
You're quick, elf,
Lana said, grinning despite the intensity of the fight.
but not quick enough.
The battle was fierce and unrelenting. Tritan and Kalron clashed like titans, their swords sparking with every blow. Grodd's great axe crashed against Thara's weapon, the dwarf's raw strength matching the half-orc's ferocity. Mesra's spells lit up the battlefield, creating brief moments of chaos that gave her companions openings to strike. Despite their efforts, the rival group was no pushover. The ranger's arrows found their mark, grazing Mesra's arm more than once. The wizard recovered quickly, unleashing a fiery bolt that scorched the ground at Grodd's feet, forcing him to leap aside with a curse. Raymar, the other fighter, joined forces with Kalron in a relentless assault against Tritan, hoping to exhaust the indomitable warrior. Kalron and Raymar quickly found themselves tested to their very limits, as Tritan's strength and resolve proved more than a match for them both.
Enough!
Kalron shouted, raising his hand to signal a halt. His group fell back, their faces grim and their bodies battered. Both parties stood panting in the aftermath of the clash, their weapons lowered but still at the ready. Bloodied and bruised, it was clear that neither side had emerged unscathed. Kalron glared at Tritan, his scarred face twisted in anger.
Take the shard, but hear this. If we cross paths again, it won't go over well for you.
Tritan remained silent, responding only with a determined glare at Kalron, showing no fear of his threats. With that, the rival dungeon raiders turned and retreated into the darkness of the ravine. Thara shot Grodd a venomous glare, and Enith gave Lana a mocking salute before disappearing from view. As the silence returned, Mesra let out a slow breath.
That could have gone worse.
Ven plucked a soothing tune on his lute, his dry humor returning despite his injuries.
I think we've earned a drink. Or 5. Clancy's brew never sounded so good.
Tritan nodded, his gaze lingering on the path the rival raiders had taken.
Let's get back to Solister. We've got what we came for, and that's what matters.
The streets of Solister seemed quieter in the early morning hours, the hustle and bustle of the night's activity replaced with a somber stillness that only the rising sun could break. The group walked side by side, though their steps were heavier now, worn from the brutal clash with Kalron and his crew. Yet there was also a quiet sense of satisfaction among them. They had succeeded in their quest. The Ember Shard was within their grasp, and the journey was near its end. As they reached the gates of the Velmont estate, they were met by a pair of guards who nodded respectfully.
"The lady is expecting you,"
one of them said, leading the way down the manicured path lined with towering trees and blooming flowers, their fragrance thick in the air. The estate itself was a grand mansion, its stone walls adorned with ivy and intricate carvings. Inside, the marble floors gleamed beneath their boots, and the smell of burning incense filled the air. It was a world far removed from the dirt and grime of the dungeon, from the narrow, claustrophobic tunnels they had crawled through. Here, in the luxurious halls of Lady Seraphina Velmont, all seemed calm, serene, and wealthy. Finally, they arrived at the doors of the lady's private study. The guards stepped aside, and Tritan gave a small nod to his companions. They had come this far. All they had to do now was present the Ember Shard and accept the fruits of their labor. Lady Seraphina Velmont stood near the large window that overlooked her expansive garden, her back to the room, as she watched the sunlight filter through the branches. Her long black velvet dress cascaded to the floor in a soft shimmer, and her silver hair was perfectly styled, immovable by the passage of time. She had the look of someone who had everything and more, a woman whose name commanded respect.
Tritan, I knew you and your worthy companions would succeed.
Tritan stepped forward, the Ember Shard carefully wrapped in cloth within his pack.
Lady Velmont, we encountered resistance, but the shard is in our possession,
he said, his tone professional, yet tinged with the weight of their ordeal. The lady turned, her eyes narrowing with interest as she took in the sight of the adventurers.
I can see that,
she said, her gaze briefly flicking over their injuries, the signs of battle still fresh on their bodies.
I will have my healer attend to you right away.
Thank you, milady, but that won't be necessary. We know of a healer that resides near Clancy's tavern. He usually takes care of our wounds,
Tritan said, while formally bowing his head to her.
Very well then. You've earned more than just your reward,
she said, walking toward one of many decorated chests in the chamber. With a flick of her wrist, the chest opened, revealing stacks of coin, jewels that gleamed with an otherworldly light, and scrolls tied with golden ribbons. It was the kind of treasure most adventurers could only dream of. Lady Seraphina's voice was composed, yet carried a weight of significance as she spoke.
You have earned both my recognition and respect. Now, take what you have earned. If there are no further matters to address, I must attend to other pressing concerns.
With a graceful bow, she added,
I wish you all a pleasant day. Your efforts have been greatly appreciated.
Tritan and his companions returned the bow in silent respect.
We thank you for your generosity and kindness, milady,
Tritan said with formal courtesy. As they made their way through the grand hall, Lana discreetly seized a few valuable items and slipped them into her pouch, her actions unnoticed. Outside, the cool morning air wrapped around them, a sharp contrast to the warmth inside the Velmont estate. As the group walked down the cobbled streets toward Clancy's tavern, the air felt lighter, though still charged with the adrenaline of the day's events. As they settled into their familiar spots, the tavern's warmth and bustle enveloped them. It was a well-earned reprieve from the dangers of the dungeon, from the rival raiders, and from the uncertainties that lay ahead.